What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our content, we create content like what you're watching right now, simply to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name's Captain Nostalgia. I am a writer, podcaster, and the director of our film festival called Horrific Hope. First film festival is kind to be horror-centric and mental health focused. If you would like to submit your films, whether shorts or features, and our screenwriting contest as well. Links are going to be in the descriptions below, along with links to our podcasts, social media, Patreon, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. Well, turn it up to 11 because today we're going to be talking about the Retaliators. So it should be worth mentioning before I even get into the plot synopsis of this, if you guys follow bands like Ice Nine Kills, Motley Crue, Asking Alexandria, and Papa Roach, then you guys might have heard a little bit about this movie. I say that because some of those members make their way into this movie and make music for this movie and have been promoting this movie. So let's talk about it. So the Retaliators tells the story of a local pastor whose daughter gets kidnapped, murdered, and pastor basically in his search for peace subsequently finds himself on a questionable path to revenge, kind of as a way, because this movie is sometimes I like the idea of non-actors making movies because sometimes those performances are really fantastic, and then you get stuff like the Retaliators that is a little bit less than desirable. Let me start off by saying the acting in this movie is not the problem. Like, even for as campy as cameos from Papa Roach's Jacoby Shaddix or Ice Nine Kills frontman Spencer Charnas, this movie is not, those performances are not the issue here. If you are an Ice Nine Kills fan, then you know that Spencer Charnas loves to do acting in his own music videos, so coming into the world of actual acting is really no different. Like, I mean, he has a memorable cameo in this movie, and it's campy, as is Jacoby's, but I mean, Tommy Lee makes a cameo in this as well, also super campy. The rock stars in this movie that made the soundtrack possible and that are involved in the actual making of this, their cameos are probably on the more positive side of this movie. Acting overall, like, is actually pretty solid. It's one of the better parts of this movie. Michael Lombardi, who I grew up with on Rescue Me, does a really great job at walking the line between being a timid man of God to a grieving father, and kind of how those two character traits really propel his character growth throughout the entire movie. I thought was handled really well, and Lombardi really rises to the occasion. Has a lot of energy in the course of this movie, and brings for a fascinating character study on a character like a pastor, grieving father, and a questionable murderer. On the flip side of that, Marc Menchaca plays the detective investigating Lombardi's daughter's death, and his character is, I don't want to say problematic. Problematic is not the right word to talk about. Like, he's presented in one light, and then literally the movie changes settings and then is presented in a different light. Like, his character is, I'm not sure how I feel coming out of this movie about his character. I think maybe that has more to do with the writing than it does Menchaca's actual performance, because Menchaca as an actor in this movie does a fine job. It's not as memorable as Lombardi or some of the rockers that make cameos in this movie, but he does a good job for what he's given. Ultimately, my biggest problem with this movie is its writing. I think it's script. The movie's presented as like a action grief piece in certain portions of it. There's like weird subplots with Robert Nepper of Twin Peaks and Prison Break fame that is basically like trying to like settle a war between like gangs and turfs, and that's never really explored, just kind of left hanging. Actually, like a couple scenes that like try to like build up that plot line, and ultimately just kind of goes nowhere. The movie is presented to be like this like breaking like new slasher, and honestly couldn't be further from the truth. Coming into this movie with the hopes of a gore fest, this movie will sadly let you down because it's too busy to be a character piece. It's a little bit too unbalanced to be a drama, and there's not enough horror elements to actually call itself a horror movie. I wouldn't even say that this movie builds towards a horror movie because it kind of has this like Evil Dead-esque opening, and then then you realize that it's building back to that moment that we see in the beginning to kind of come full circle. But it's kind of a really slow, boring crawl to get back to that full circle. And once you kind of see what that full circle is, it's not even satisfying. Horror elements of this movie could be the weakest elements overall, honestly, and sadly to report. I will say, though, it does create some pretty cool gags throughout the course of the climax of this movie, but because of how long it took to get there, they leave literally as quick as they came. Pacing follows most traditional slashers, which kind of last somewhere between 85 to 90 minutes, and that's kind of what it is. But with this one, at least with like typical like 80s slashers or even 90s and even modern slashers, like at least within the first half hour you kind of get to meet the killer, and this one's just kind of slowly working to that, but it's not satisfying. I can give this movie a 2 out of 5. I think the performances in this movie are really good. The pacing is hit or miss with it, but it's just too busy and is trying to do too many different things to really have its own voice, and ultimately ends up coming up just really unsatisfactory and just hits up as what could end up being one of the worst horror movies of the year. About mental health now. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health from the film of which we are reviewing, and can talk about it for just a few moments and hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. Interesting to note that Lombardi didn't only lose his daughter in this movie, but when the film opens up past the cold opening, we also find out that he has also recently lost his wife. The film never really explores it. It's irrelevant for the point I'm going to be making, but it hits his daughter Sarah really hard, and there's a point in the scene where she's kind of at this group therapy session, and the therapist basically turns to her and says, "The only person that you can heal is you." Simple truth that we oftentimes end up overcomplicating for a number of different reasons, and while our intentions might be good, our own mental health is not worth sacrificing for the sake of relationships, people liking us, jobs, employers, etc. And it all comes back down to us understanding our own value as human beings and where we draw the line in the sand for our own self-respect and our own self-image and self-love. We often have this practice of pouring ourselves out for others and trying to love others when we fail to love ourselves. We have to stop doing that, because while the intentions might be good in the present time now, if we don't take care of ourselves and our own mental health now, it will often end up creating things like burnout, broken relationships, depression, and more in the future. The only person that you can heal is you. So don't try and take on the mental health of others, because at the end of the day, the thing that you have to take into consideration is you can say all the right things, have all the right intentions, and even give the people the right resources, but it's their job at the end of the day, and it's their choice and their decision on whether or not to follow through with those resources or to actually put into practice the very things that you're suggesting. As part of the reason that we continue to make this content is because we want people to understand that at the end of the day, that while yes, we as content creators are middlemen, we are openly discussing mental health, we're running podcasts about it, we're doing movie reviews like this, we're creating interview content, we're going to conventions, we're doing film festivals and running our own film festival, all the sake of openly discussing and providing resources for mental health discussion and ending the stigma. But at the end of the day, we also understand that it's up to the viewer, it's up to the recipient, it's up to the viewer, listener, the attendee, whatever, to ultimately take our advice or our resources and use them practically. With that, if you or someone you know is watching this and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, depression, or anxiety, or suicide, or any of the things that we've talked about in this video, click the links in the descriptions below to check out our mental health resource library. And be sure to check out the Retaliators when it hits limited release beginning September 14th. We're going to be away on vacation, at least I will be, for the next few days. So all of our content is on pause until next Monday, the 12th. So we'll be back talking about Barbarian. We do have content that's still going to release through right here on YouTube, more of our video interviews from creators and people we sat down with at Creature Feature. If you guys want to check out those episodes, the links are going to be at the end of this video. So have a good night. Make sure that you guys hit subscribe.